Hi, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome back to Naylo's Thrift Talk. I'm Lola.
And I'm Nay.
And if you're new to our YouTube show, we are a weekly show that is all about thrifting and reselling on platforms like eBay and Poshmark, and how we both use thrifting and reselling as a way to make our lives more sustainable and flexible so we can work on our own and on our own time and on our own terms.
Yes.
Anything you want to add to that, Nay?
No, that sounds like a good intro.
I should write that down. That was actually pretty nice.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And we always start off with a few special segments. First, little housekeeping. We have an exciting show coming up next week with a special guest. And Nate thought let you introduce her.
Yes. So Anastasia is also thrifts and resells, and she used to live in my area in actually the New York City, northern New Jersey area. And I used to see her at various meetups and whatnot in this area. So she moved to Florida. She got married and moved to Florida. So she is going to be talking, among other things, about the differences, the regional differences between different places on the East Coast now that she's in Florida versus the northern East Coast. And Lola can talk a little bit about her area too. So we have a few points on the East Coast to talk about. And she'll also be sharing some information about what she sells and stuff like that. So she's going to be a great guest next week. And that's Anastasia. And I will butcher her last name. I believe it's Andruski, but I'm probably butchering it.
I was wondering because a lot of Polish people like anglicize their names in different ways. So I don't know if she says it. But
yes, and I really don't know exactly how she pronounces it. That's something that I should know. But she always says that it's common in Poland, but it's just, hard for us to.
I would say Andrzejewski, but I don't know if she says it that way.
Well, we will see. Tune in next week to find out. So that'll be at 1 p.m. next Friday. We did change our time to 1 p.m.
Yes. So that ended up being a little bit better for both of us with our outside our YouTube show commitments. And we hope it works for all of you. It seems like maybe we've actually had a few more people tuning in live at 1 o'clock. So
yeah, so it's a little later on the West Coast. So
yeah, that is true. Good point. So Nadine, what are you wearing today?
Okay, so Lola said last night, she said, "Oh, well, it's the start of baseball season. Let's wear some thrifted baseball items." Well, the last 2 weeks, I happened to wear my baseball shirts. I wore my Mets shirt last week, and I wore my Phillies shirt the week before. And I thought, I hope I have something else. But I did find another one. I do have another Phillies shirt somewhere. The one that I found, though, was long sleeved, and I was not wearing long sleeves in the seat. So this is actually from the Goodwill Blue Box a couple weeks ago.
I remember it.
It's an Atlanta Braves shirt. So not necessarily a Braves fan, but for those of you that are, I might be selling this. I will wash it before I list it. It is a men's large. So if anyone is interested in a beautiful, majestic brand Atlanta Braves shirt, it will probably be listed. So,
and that reminds me. So I think in that box, you also got a item from the NFL team in Washington, D.C., which just announced that for the next season, they will officially temporarily be known as Washington Football Team.
Yes.
That's their new name. Every time it came up on the ESPN crawl yesterday, it just like cracked me and Chris up.
I did list. That's funny. I did list. You would think they could come up with something, I did list it already, but you know what? The market is so saturated with those items, so there's not a high demand for that.
That's interesting. So probably branded people are also thinking, sell this now because people want the nostalgia or something.
But
it's not really.
The market is so saturated. Yeah. There's so many. It was so mass produced that's really not the case. So
interesting. Well, I'm curious to see what their new name is going to be.
Yes, as am I.
And I am wearing, not for sale, because these are my personal wear to the ballpark items. So this is my Phillies shirt, which I remember getting with you. I forget if we were at Goodwill or local thrift store in Philly, but I was going to a game that night, and I realized I needed a shirt. So I was like, I need to, and of course it was not hard to find one, and it's super cute. I love the graffiti look on it. So it's one of my favorite shirts. And then this hat, I was also with you, and I remember We were definitely at Goodwill because it was the weirdest thing. So this was back in 2018, and it was the first day of postseason baseball. And I had this weird premonition that if I went into Goodwill and I found a Red Sox hat from 2004, the Red Sox would win the World Series. And this was in Philly, remember? So we were not in Red Sox country.
Right.
And sure enough, I went over to the hats rack and I dug through it a little bit. And it was like this feeling like I was looking for something I knew was there. And I found this hat. And it is indeed a 2004 World Series Red Sox hat. And the
That's so funny.
Went on to win the World Series that year.
Very cool.
And if you don't know, I'm a huge Red Sox fan. All of our cats are named after Red Sox players.
Yes.
And Mookie, who's now a Dodgers player, I was really sad about that last night. Anyway, so baseball's back. I'm really happy. Lots of emotions. And we both like to thrift our baseball gear.
Uh-oh. You might have to reconsider a friendship here.
Why? Oh, no. You're so misguided. It's okay. We'll work on it. Thrifted home decor.
Yes. So I have here a
and I realized I didn't put us on the
bigger. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, sorry guys. Here. So. Now you can see our
yeah. So I have this. It is and I use this I think I thrifted it at Goodwill for like a couple dollars a few years back, and it is an Italian made in Sicily plate.
Pretty.
Yeah, so it's really pretty. It's hand painted, and I use this when I have guests, for like, cheese and crackers or whatever, snacks that I put out. So I do actually use it. I'm not going to sell it, but that's my thrifted home decor. If I don't break it.
So I think I've done a lot of different like organization items before, but it's one of my favorite things to thrift. So this is another one. And these are jars. This is my favorite brand is Weck, W-E-C-K. It's German, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
No.
But I love these because all of the parts are interchangeable. So if you have the right size opening, all the lids mix and match, and then they have little clips that keep them on. And you can use these for actually like canning and stuff. But of course, if I thrift it, I don't want to use it for food. But I use them for everything. We have one in the bathroom for our toothbrushes and cotton swabs and stuff like that. And then this one is it's like a bunch of little sewing notions. So I have them right on my desk, and it's easy to reach for and use. And so basically any jar, like bell jars are great, ball jars are great, and or the ones that are kind of a little bit better known. But a lot of these, especially like the French and German canning jars, I find them from the early 20th century all the time. They're super easy to find because they last forever, and they just are extremely useful. So not something I would necessarily list, although if you find a good plot of different like mason jars, you can definitely sell those for weddings, and people will look for them locally. So that might be like a good Facebook marketplace type item, but always just a favorite item that I'll pick up because I know I will use them, and it's nice to have.
Very cute.
And yeah. And there's my little Dodger.
And there's Mookie.
There's Mookie's butt.
Mookie's butt, rather. And we are going into our main segment now.
Our main segment today, which was Nadine's brilliant idea. How do you measure up? So there's lots of measurements that you need to take when you're listing things for resale, different weights, and like clothing measurements, all sorts of little details that are easy to overlook for specialty items. So we thought we would go over some of our go-to tips and tricks for measuring the things that we list.
Yes.
You want to start off with?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I often will like end up going out of the house with my measuring tape around my neck because I'm listing and I forget that I have it, and I'll walk around, I'll go to the post office, or I'll be like in my car and I'll be like, oh, I have my measurings. So this is actually a common thing that I do. which is really funny. So, okay, so first off, we're going to give some clothing tips. So basically, just in general for clothing, lay garments on a flat, hard surface, smooth out the wrinkles, and because hanging clothes can stretch them out, as is having them on a mannequin. So you want to lay them down flat and take your measurements. And use a flexible sewing tape measure, not a hard, rigid one, not like one that you're going to buy at Home Depot to measure drywall or something, you know. This is one that has inches and centimeters, and it's a nice long one. It's thick.
Oh, that was an extra long one.
Yes, it is. This one is one of my favorites, actually. It goes to 120 inches.
You know you're a reseller when you have a favorite tape measure.
Oh, that is true. Yes. And so measure twice. You should double check your measurements because you can make errors and you want to avoid unhappy buyers. So I always will just like double check myself. And then be aware of cheap measuring tapes because they can be off. I have bought tape measures at the dollar store. Like in a pinch, I've needed a tape measure. I bought like cheap paper one and I have found that it is off in measurements. So do be aware. Now, I'm not saying that you can buy a dollar store one and it can be fine, but definitely check it against, check it against a reputable one that you know is correct because it will, sometimes they are off. So be aware of that. And measure to the nearest quarter inch with clothing. You don't want to have to say like it's 2.95, not, inches, whatever. Measure to the nearest quarter inch. So that's because you are going to double the measurement. So, a quarter inch doubled is a half inch. So make sure that you are exact, but you can round to the nearest quarter inch. That's fine. Make sure you account for the fact that manufacturers make their clothes to different specifications. Vintage clothing sizes measure smaller than modern day clothing. And you can check against size charts online for some items and mention that the size varies. A lot of manufacturers have their own size charts on their websites, and you should still measure because things shrink, things run differently. But, you can, if you have something without a size on an item, you can judge based on the measurements. And if the brand does have a size chart, then you can easily convert it to the closest size that it would be. And you can easily list in both inches and centimeters because most of the world does use the metric system. Get a measuring tape with both measuring, both on it. This has centimeters on the back and inches on the front. And I also, Sizely is a great web site. That's one of my go-to. Yeah, so they have a lot of different measure cheat sheets. There's a blog on there that has a lot. And what they do want you to do is subscribe. I have never done this, but a lot of resellers do subscribe, and you can make your own chart, own little size chart, little diagrams to show how you take your measurements and insert it into every listing so that you don't have to say like shoulder to shoulder, you don't have to say like crotch to top of waist, or it'll show the diagram in the listing. I haven't done that. It is a paid service, but that is a handy little tool. And always include measurements across all platforms. There is no exception. I know some people are like, oh, most Poshmark sellers don't put them in. Put them in. It'll avoid questions. It will get you more buyers, more, I will click out if I don't see measurements on listing. A lot of people will just click out and go to something that does have it. And always include, so, and then here's an example of a big measuring chart that shows some of the ways to measure certain items, and you can find these online. Pinterest is a great resource. Just, do a Google search. You can, there's a ton of resources out there, which is great that can help you with showing you what each measurement to take is. So.
Absolutely. And I love Pinterest because you can I'll find images like this and then like add them to a pin board that I can pull up on my phone, or even just save them to my phone and make a photo album. So if there's something you always have to Google, mm-hmm. Like I always have to Google which buttons are on the left and on the right.
Oh, I know. I do that too, and I list how many times, and I still,
right. Yeah, so I finally saved an image on my phone, like a photo roll, and so I can just pull it up. And so
measuring shirts, these are just a couple of ways to measure shirts. So what I do, and it is different, men's shirts are a little bit different, but in general, what you want to do is take your For women's, bust is, you want to list bust, and that's pit to pit and doubled. For men's, I say chest, and I don't double it. I just list the pit to pit measurement. Definitely say bust for women's, chest for men's. There's a difference. And then for women's and men's, shoulder seam to shoulder seam is shoulder to shoulder. Sleeve length, now it can be either, and I specify which one I use, but it can also be nape of neck to bottom of sleeve hem, because you don't know necessarily where the shoulder is going to fall. So I like that measurement better than what they're showing here. But this is another acceptable measurement from the shoulder seam to the end of the sleeve. Length from the top of the shoulder to bottom hem is the overall length. The side vent length is another extra one. Those are the little like cutouts on the bottom sides. And men's shirts, neck measurements with dress shirts, such as the size 16, they usually are listed on the shirt though, which is helpful, but it's basically just the circumference of the neck. And then sleeveless shirts, I'd measure the arm opening as well. So and again, these are some little cheat graphics that you can find online. So, and now we're going to go on to pants. So pants, the inseam is, the inseam is from the crotch to the bottom hem of the pant. The rise is, and now there is a back rise and a front rise, and they can vary. So you can list both. But the main rise that people list is just the front, and that's understood to be the front. So that's from the crotch to the top of the waist. The out seam is the entire length along the outer edge. That's not shown here of the pant. So that's another measurement. And the hip is, you measure it 8 inches down from the waist is the hip measurement. And you can measure that across and then double that too. So those are the most common ones. And then there's a few others are the leg opening or the cuff. Sometimes, if pants are extra skinny or they're wide leg, people want that measurement. So, and then note if they're crop length, full length, or ankle length. And even if the size measurements are listed on pants, like in men's, like a 32 times 34, 32 by 30, which is the waist and then the inseam. That's always how it is. You still measure those because pants could have been altered or shrunk when pre-owned. And if altered, measure the amount taken up and list that and say whether the hem could be taken down with X amount of inches. So,
yeah, Jason has a great point that as someone who's tall, then measurements become really important when you need clothing to fit, your body. If you're outside maybe the bell curve, then it becomes more important. And I always see people, especially on Poshmark, saying things like, oh, nobody lists measurements on Poshmark, but you don't know how many people looked at your listing and then just clicked away because they didn't want to bother asking. I also hate when you have to dig out that one item because someone asked for a measurement, and it seems like it's faster just to list and not do measurements, but then it takes so much more time to find it, pull it out, find your measuring tape, and do all of that at 10 o'clock at night when a sale is on the line. It's just not, it's not worth that hassle.
Absolutely. And so, I do the same thing. I'm a hippie girl. My hips are always, even when I was a size 2, I had wide hips, no matter what. I've never, so I need that hip measurement. And a lot of clothing sellers don't put the hip measurement in dresses or, pants. And it drives me crazy because I need that measurement. So if I don't feel like taking the time to ask, I'll just click through and find a listing that has it. So
totally. And a quick note on fast fashion. One of the things that keeps it so inexpensive is that when they cut the pieces of fabric, they will cut a whole stack of pieces all at once. And because of that, there will be variation between the top piece and the bottom piece. The top piece will be smaller, the bottom piece will be larger. And you can even go into a store and hold up 2 size 8s next to each other, and one will be visibly larger than the other. So for people who say, oh, I always shop at the Gap, I know I'm a size 8, you're not really always a size 8 because that one size is going to have some variation. So
and the same thing in different styles. There's different fits. There's classic fit, there's loose fit, there's, there's skinny fit. There's, so it's definitely not the same across the board. And then there's aside from that, the vintage sizes if you're thrift store shopping.
Well, and then on top of that, just knowing anyone who shops in women's clothing knows that there's no standard between brands. Like, one
Absolutely.
size in one brand is totally different from that same
Oh,
size
yeah,
in another brand.
absolutely.
So it's, measurements are super helpful. And I think it actually helps people get a better fit than if they necessarily were going into a store and don't bother to try things on. I know it's true for me.
Yeah. And another thing I did not mention that I should have is that junior sizes too, and petite sizes are cut differently. So always add that in, if it's a petite or if it's a junior, put it in the right section and do the measurement. So.
And make it super clear. I know that I recently, a few months ago, I had a return on eBay for that very reason. I thought clearly that it was a petite size, but the buyer didn't notice it. And so, she returned for fit, and I was happy to take the return, but I was kicking myself because if I had just made sure that petite was a little bit more front and center, I think there wouldn't have been that.
And there's certain measurements that are more important for certain size types, like petite. The sleeve measurement is very important. The sleeves tend to run shorter, and petite women want to make sure that their sleeves aren't going to be too long, or too short. So then the next thing is measuring dresses, and basically similar measurements, but there are. So you want to measure the total length, the bust, the waist, the hips, the total length from the top of the shoulder to the bottom, and the slit length if applicable. If there's a side vent, then that. The sleeve length, again, I do the nape of the neck to the bottom of the sleeve head. Shoulder to shoulder is another one. And I also, for dresses with a belted or definitive waist, and this is kind of what Jason, if he was a woman, he would need this size. It's an added bonus.
Or if he wants to wear a dress.
Or if he wants to wear a dress, he does rock a dress well. It's an added bonus to list the shoulder to waist and the waist to hem measurements as well. I have had that question, and I've started putting that measurement in my dresses now because, women want to know how long the torso is, especially if it has that definitive waist. So that's another thing that you should put in. So.
One thing I would add, especially on plus size clothing, because women who are in the plus size range tend to have arms that are larger. And so the sleeve opening circumference becomes important.
Yes. That's very true. So.
And some brands, I think, are better than others at adjusting that part of the size. So it is something that can fit, cannot fit.
Yes.
And I have that issue too with some vintage dresses where I think, like, I have one vintage dress that fit me everywhere except for right around the arms. And so this woman had like teeny tiny stick arms, and my arms would not fit through it. So, especially in vintage clothing, you want to just overcompensate, just have as many measurements as possible because bodies are different. Bodies are built
absolutely
different.
You can never give too much information. I agree.
Yeah.
And for skirts, it's basically the same: hips doubled, waists and doubled, the slit length if applicable, and the total length waist to hip. So
sometimes for the hips on a skirt, you'll see the word free instead of a measurement, which just means that it's like very wide and there's a lot of fabric. Remember that some people, like Nadine said, do have wide hips, and so that measurement may still be necessary for them, even though it looks to you like
I still give it, even if it's a large. I'll just say, like, if it's a size small and it's got like a 50-inch hip, I'll just say it's a free size, but across from side it measures. So yes, that has always been a sticking point for me. So
yeah.
And Ginny has a comment. Oh yeah, that's basically the same measurement, but it shows you it's a little bit of a better graphic for dresses. So.
And especially like a couple episodes ago, I was saying how I always feel like I sell formal dresses or high-end dresses twice because people really want them to fit right. So that's a great reason why you really just add every detail you can, and more likely you will get a buyer who is happy with the item and it fits them.
Jenny says 40 plus years ago, I worked at Hager Slacks, sewing in zippers on men's pants. If you made a mistake, you just ripped it out and could make up an inch in difference in the measurement.
So would that be in the like the rise, or?
I would assume.
I'm trying to imagine that. Slacks are one thing that I do not sew.
Yes, well, I know
pants
are a little different, but I do sell pants, but for some reason, and they're easier. I hate measuring pants. I don't know why.
So funny.
Easy to photograph. They're easy to list, but I just hate measuring pants.
One of the few times we like differ on something, because I love selling pants.
Shoes are my thing.
Especially, they're so easy for me to list. Women's far more than men's.
Yeah.
And then you love shoes and
dresses. I can list dresses. Oh, I love measuring dresses and listing dresses. So funny. Okay, and our next thing is hats. So there's so basically the first one is the hat height. That's place the measuring tape at the edge of the brim and pull the tape up to the top of the hat. Circumference is measure the circumference of the hat by placing the measuring tape on the inside, that's number 2 there, on the inside edge of the hat head hole and pulling the measuring tape in a circle until both ends of the measuring tape meet, which can be a little cumbersome if you have a helper. That's where I get my kids to hold one side of the measuring tape because it can be a little hard to do it yourself. Or you can use a piece of tape to hold it, if you don't have a helper. And the hat brim width, if it has a brim, measure the hat brim width by placing the measuring tape at the edge of the brim and pulling it inwards toward the base of the hat. Some hats, like baseball caps, are fitted. Some of them have actual sizes inside, so you should note that. If it is adjustable, it's like a trucker snapback hat, you should mention that, but those are the basic measurements. And a couple other tips: measure a hat on a flat, solid surface. Make sure to measure the circumference correctly. You must measure the circumference of the head hole, not the outer brim. So it's going to be the inside head hole, so not the outside. So basics and for eyeglasses. I did list a pair of, I'm guilty of this. I listed a pair of Lilly Pulitzer sunglasses and I got asked measurements, and boy, did I put those measurements in there after, and now every time I list glasses, I will put the measurements. So is the lens width is the horizontal width of the frame's lens in millimeters. This is measured in millimeters. Usually it ranges from 40 to millimeters to 60 millimeters. Place the measure tape on the inside of the frame. The lens height is the vertical height of the eyeglass lens, which is measured from the top to the bottom of the lens, excluding the frame. The B measurement is important for bifocal lenses or progressive lenses. The bridge size is number 4 there. That's the distance and it's typically in millimeters. Also, it ranges from 14 to 24, and you start at the innermost side of the lenses, and then the temple or the arm length. That's a really important one to list. If you don't list all of these, definitely do the height, the bridge, and the temple. Basically the side. What is it called? I'm having a brain moment. The arm, I guess. Yeah. So it's the length of the temple from one end to the other. Also includes the bend, and your temple length can fall between 120 millimeters and 150 millimeters. When measuring, start at the hinges and continue in a straight line to the farthest point without sloping downward. The width is the frame width, is the horizontal width of the frame, and is measured in the outermost side of the frame. And then the height is the frame height, is the vertical height of the frame, and is used to measure the outmost side of the frame, which would be number 2 there. So there's your basic measurements. Now they do standardly list in millimeters, but I would do inches and millimeters. Maybe I would. You don't have to do it just in millimeters, but
for something like this, I definitely would put both inches and millimeters if you can. Especially
because most people don't understand millimeter. Well, at least in our country,
most American buyers won't understand millimeters. But if you're especially on a platform like eBay where you have international buyers,
Poshmark, maybe not so much. You can just put the inches.
Depop, much more diverse in terms of location. So again, just know your platform.
Exactly. So, and then belts are the length of the belt and the width, as well as the placement of the holes.
Yeah. Measure like how far out the holes go, just so people know whether they have to add one or not. But that's pretty easy for belts. And then ties. A little bit more diversity matters, the width and the length.
Can you pull up the tie graphic?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thought I had it up. There we go.
Okay. So so ties is, so basically, and especially when you list them on eBay, it will say that I believe it's just skinny, classic, and wide are the 3 specifications. In the item specifics, there's technically more, but this is a chart that gives you an idea of what each the average width of a skinny and the length, a narrow and a standard. And you want to measure where those arrows are, those double arrows right above the downward slant there on the tip of the tie. Measure there, that's the widest part, and then measure the whole length from lay it flat and measure the whole length from the tip all the way to the other end. So for the length. And you should mention, classic, standard, narrow, skinny,
And those are also on the item specific. So it's,
yeah, exactly.
I remember correctly, on the eBay item specifics, it does tell you exactly what the measurements are for each category. So it's pretty easy to know which one is correct just by knowing your measurement. So
yep.
It's not too hard to find the right one.
Okay, and then
we're
gonna skip over jewelry a little bit. Basically, we just measure inches, the basic length and all, but there's a whole thing of scrap metal weight and this, and my suggestion would be to consult Margaret Collier. She has a great group, Texas Gal.
Jewelry Lovers.
Yes, thank you, Jewelry. She's Texas Gal Treasures, and it's what is it? Texas Gal Jewelry Lovers. Is her? Yes, I always mix that up. But anyway, she's got a great group. So for measuring jewelry, we're not pros at that, but we basically just put basic measurements. So we're not going to get into that, but we will talk about handbags next. And handbags,
one of your areas of expertise.
Yes, this is. So here is a standard. So this is basic of what is considered, because in the eBay item specifics, you have a choice of small, medium, or large, or extra large. And this is a basic standard of what those definitions are. So anything up to 6 inches is extra small, and then you can see the rest of the measurements there, and then extra large, all the way up to extra large, which is larger than 16 inches, which would be a bag like this. So, and then this one I would consider medium. This is a Kate Spade bag. Now, when you're measuring, here's what. So we have basically what you have to do is measure the depth at the base. So, and this is how eBay standards are. Some people think that the depth is that's actually the height of the bag. So the depth at the base would be, you're folding it over like this, and you just measure the bottom of the base. And so this one is about 5 inches. That's what and I say depth at base when I measure. The width is just across the bag, side to side. And the height is bottom to top. And then there's two different, there's a handle drop and a strap drop. And I luckily have a bag with both. So this would be a handle drop. Handles are usually, if it can't fit on your shoulder, it's usually 6 inches or less is going to be considered a handle. So you want to measure from the top of the bag where the handle meets to the top of the handle. And then a strap drop is a different thing. Don't interchange the two, because the strap and handle, this is a strap. Strap is something that will fit on your shoulder or be a crossbody. So that's usually 6 inches or longer. And then again, measure where it meets the bag to the top of the strap. Pretty easy.
That's great. I actually think I was mixing up the depth on some of
it can be a little confusing.
I'll go back and check those. That's very useful to know.
Yeah. So, and I have a diagram on that too, real quick.
Yes. Putting that up.
So there you can see
saying about the width and height versus depth.
Yeah. So the depth is across the bottom from center to the center back. So that is the depth of the bag. So I do depth at base, and I just measure that, and I specify that. People do get confused between the height and the depth for sure.
Makes sense. So. And then shoes, another of your areas of expertise.
Yeah. So basically, I would say watch my shoe show from 2 weeks ago for more in-depth information on shoe measurements, because I gave a lot of information that I'm not going to give here now, just because we're just doing it briefly. But Zappos has great size charts and measurement guides. I mentioned a lot of different, I mentioned some other references on the shoe show that I did 2 weeks ago. So definitely look for that and watch it if you haven't already. So for boots, these are the basic measurements. You want to do the heel height, which you can see there, the shaft height, which is the bottom of where it meets the heel, to the top of the heel rather, to all the way to the top of the boot. And then you want to measure, this is really important, the shaft circumference and the boot opening you definitely want to let buyers know those, especially because a lot of, boots, they all run differently, and women have different size calves. And that is a good thing with plus size boots like Torrid, brands like Torrid, Lane Bryant. They have wider shaft circumference for plus size women. So you definitely want to note those in the boots. That's very important. And yeah, and then in heels, you can see the heel height is very important. And then I measure so it's a stiletto, and then there's a block heel, a little different, but and then I also measure on the insole. I always give the heel height and then the insole length. I give the insole length at the insole, which is the inside of the shoe. I go from the back of the shoe to the top to the toe, and I measure that length. And then I have a graphic for that too, with the red marks. Yeah, that one. Yeah. So and then I measure where the top horizontal red line is at the ball of the foot across on the insole, and then the back one is at the back of the heel across on the insole. If you can't get into the insole to measure, you should always try to, but if there's no way, like in the case of a pair of boots that doesn't zip, and you can't get in there, then you can measure the outsole and let the buyers know that you measured the outsole. But the key is to get into that insole and get those measurements from there. And if you have a pair of shoes that doesn't have the size, there are size charts that give you, like Zappos has one that give you the approximate length in inches and the conversion to sizes. So,
and in that case, you would want to say, like, it's not marked, but this is the approximate size, right? As opposed to just
correct.
saying size 7 or whatever. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a difference between the heel height and the platform height. I just wanted to show that. This is also from Zappos. And the platform height, if you have platform heels, like in the first picture, that's the little arrow, and then the tall arrow is obviously the heel. And then there is a thing called hidden platforms, which is the second one, so check for those. That means that the insole is elevated, the foot bed and the insole is elevated, and there is a platform that is underneath the outsole material. So it's kind of hidden in there. So check for those. And then if it does have a hidden platform, then you should definitely give that platform height as well.
And those are not quite as much in style right now, I think. So probably less common to see. But I remember, like, when I was in college, they were super popular.
They'll be back.
They will be back for sure.
And then,
so now moving into more hard goods and household items. Now you had some great tips for measuring mugs. So of course there are different terms for different size mugs to begin with.
Yeah. So there's a great little cheat sheet, and you can find these online. I don't remember what website I got this from. Wish I remembered, but it was from Etsy. I know that, but so it is. So there's an idea of so if you have this is the measurement in ounces. With mugs, the most important measurement is ounces. So there's the size guide that's for espresso, that's the tiniest one, 2.3, all the way up to, like an oversized latte or travel tumbler, which is up to 20, 25 ounces. So that gives you an idea, and you can list those terms in your keywords based on the measurements in ounces if you're not sure what type of mug it is. So, and you should definitely have a measuring cup, fill it with water, and fill it to capacity, and that's how many ounces it is. And I also will do measure from the bottom, the base to the top, and give the inches, and then the circumference on the top, where the round opening on the top.
You probably just do the diameter, right?
You can, that's fine. You really don't need.
Probably easier to do that.
The ounces, and some mugs and drinkware has the capacity listed right on the bottom. So check for that before you start measuring. Like in Starbucks mugs, they have that a lot. Super helpful. So,
a couple notes on crafting supplies, which we love. So fabric.
Yeah.
usually sold by the yard. And you will see, especially like on eBay or Etsy, you will see it sold by the yard or the half yard, and that's the price listed, which is a great way to do it. If you're not super comfortable with fabric, I definitely would sell it based on the piece that you have and sell the whole piece as one item. But you do want to include, of course, the total yardage of the fabric. And then also the width of the fabric, which there are different standard widths. Usually it's 36 or 45 inches, but there are a few other ones. And that width is based on the width of the loom it came off of. So you can see the selvages on each end, and that's how it was produced. You might also find some terms like fat quarter. I've definitely found fat quarters in the bins before, and quilting fabric can be quite expensive. So if you do find already packaged fat quarters, you might want to check and make sure that it is the full fat quarter. But like it says on this diagram here, that's 18 by 22 inches, is about a quarter of a yard. And then you can sell those out also as bundles quite easily. So, include the total yardage, but often you'll see a like collection of fat quarters, and it's a bunch of different prints that coordinate. So that's how quilters use that fabric. And then a quick way to tell your yardage, if you're in the thrift store and you're just trying to see if it's, if it's worth to pick up based on how much there is there, because of course, the larger the cut of fabric, the more it's worth, is just to hold it to your chest and then extend your arm out and hold one end. And that is about a yard. So if you ever go into a fabric store, you'll probably see people doing this just to get an idea of like how much fabric they need. This is one item where I would definitely include meters as well as yards, because especially again, if you're on Etsy or eBay and you're shipping overseas, you will have buyers who use the metric system. And if you have a pattern, and this could be true of both American and overseas buyers, because now that the internet is one way that people will buy patterns digitally, they could buy, an American buyer could have a European pattern that gives the yardage needs in metric. And they just want to know how many meters you have available and if that will work for their project. So it's definitely useful to just take the time and type it into Google and let Google do the conversion for you and include that on your list.
And then square size is one thing that is in the eBay item specifics. That is basically the square, the size of the square when you have a pattern fabric before the pattern repeats. So.
Oh yes, good.
Yeah, pretty easy to measure. And 1 yard, if you don't know, is 3 feet or about 90 centimeters. So.
And then, sorry, my cats are in rare form today. So yarn's another thing where the amount is very important to buyers, because it will mean the difference between that being usable for their project and not. So weight of yarn can be really helpful. Usually a skein of yarn will come in 50 or 100 gram balls or hanks. And if you're not sure if that if what you found is the full amount, or if someone's used some of it already, you can always just use your postage scale to measure and get an idea. And there is slight variation. So say 48 grams is most likely the full skein. But if you have 40 grams, then you probably have, someone used a little bit. I would use both grams and ounces are, again, like meters and yards are different measurements that different people will use. So you could include both, and it's helpful. And then another important measurement that can be helpful if you have a bunch of skeins of yarn that are not clearly labeled is the wraps per inch. So what you want to do for that is you take your ruler, which, let's see, I thought was right next to me. So you take your ruler and you take the yarn and wrap it around the ruler carefully so that each thread of yarn kind of lines up next to it. And the number of wraps per inch is basically the heft or the weight of the yarn. So if it's worsted, if it's DK or sport, and you can look that up. So it's a standard measurement, but that can let you know what kind of weight of yarn it is. And you can put that in your listing so that buyers will know whether or not it's what they're looking for. If especially vintage yarns can sometimes be really ambiguous and not give you a lot of information on the label, or if it's missing a label. So that will help identify it. And we just wanted to end with a couple things that we always have on hand in our kit for different measurements. So Nadine already mentioned her trusty measuring tape, which is always important.
Yes.
If you are selling jewelries, we didn't super get into, but of course there's like specialty items for that. So you may or may not want to invest in a caliper, a ring sizer, different things that are specialty for different items. Postal scale, the same one that you use for shipping, always comes in handy to me for listing because, like I mentioned, yarn, the weight can matter. And then the measuring cup is sort of a less expected item. Probably already have one, but always, good to grab it from your kitchen if you're listing a bunch of mugs, or get one to keep with your thrifting supplies if you do that on a regular basis.
Yes. And and you should basically, any hard goods or whatever, you should basically measure. And you can sometimes show like something for size reference. If you have something really tiny and really, really large that it's hard to put like a soda can in there, or something else for scale. So
great tip.
People put like a penny in for fabric, stuff like that.
Especially for fabric, that can help give the scale of the print.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's it for our main segment. And
as usual,
quick tip. And I also highly recommend you go back and watch our yarn show too, because that has a lot more information about yarn and measuring.
So for a lot of the different, we have an episode about vintage clothing, and so if there's one specific item you want some more guidance on, we do talk about measurements in those, but we thought it would also be helpful to kind of give a broad view of what buyers look for and what we always include and what we find helpful.
Yes. And our news. Oh, go ahead. Oh, did you do that? I'm sorry. I don't know. I think I switched the order. I was going by.
That's fine. So news. We do have.
So we have one
really fun news story, which I now need to pull up.
Yeah. So basically, it's a new collaboration that ThreadUp is doing with, what is it? Zero Waste. Zero Waste Dan. I don't know.
Zero Waste Daniel.
Yeah, Zero Waste Daniel. That's it. So they're doing basically they have their own designs, but they're doing a collaboration that starts with ThreadUp items that I believe you can pick. Wait, I need the article up. So
I'm pulling it up.
Sorry, it's okay. But I believe that you can pick out your items and then like a blank t-shirt or whatever, and then have them customize it. I think that's how it goes.
So I'm not sure if you get to pick that, but it definitely is like the
it's using the ThreadUp items as a base for their design. So so you might just get to pick your size and the item, but then they pull from their ThreadUp inventory, I believe. So yeah, there it is. So yeah. So they have these cute tropical kind of floral and designs. Yeah, so you can see. And yeah, so it looks like, so they're teaming up with them and they're using those as a base.
And then the fabric that they use as the applique is also from some of the clothing that is sent into them. So
so that's all ThreadUp. They're upcycling ThreadUp.
I feel like this is probably items that otherwise they might put in a rescue box, stuff like that they're not able to sell on their own necessarily, but this way they give them a second life. So
it's basically their way of recycling the materials. And
it's a little bit like the Goodwill blue box. What do they call
the upcycle, the blue box originals? It is kind of like that. So and each design is unique from what I understand. So
yeah, this was exciting because I remember when I first saw the news that they were collaborating with different retailers, I thought that they were going to do something like this, where it was like a capsule collection that they were then putting in stores, and it was reusing some of the ThreadUp items that couldn't be sold as is.
But it was more like they were just
just
selling it
putting
in
thread up,
Yeah.
thread up merchandise in the store. But so this is exciting, and it's interesting to see how they might try and do this at scale, because of course anything that's handmade is really hard to do in any real, scaled way. And for ThreadUp, which is a company that basically functions on huge turnover and selling, huge numbers of items, I'm really curious to see what the sales are on these items, if they're able to, keep up with demand, what demand's like, all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on and see what happens with it for sure.
Yep.
And as usual, we have our market report. Bring that real fast.
Yes. So our market report is you know the story with this bag. So I did sell this bag. I paid $10. I sold it for $85. I probably could have sold it for more. And it is kind of a lesson to not take, the buyers who are, because she was like going back and forth and she kept kind of whittling down her offers. But I took the offer of 85 because I thought it was a decent profit, which it was. But then she opened a case saying that it reeked of cigarette smoke, which I am very sensitive to smoke odors. It was stored in a Rubbermaid bin. I don't smoke. I did get it from a thrift store, but I will not buy things if they have a smoke odor, and I'm really sensitive to that. So I am 100% sure that it didn't leave with a smoke odor. But, so my answer was, well, maybe the postal carrier was smoking or something. I don't know what happened, but Poshmark did find the case in my favor. And
which I was super surprised, like very pleasantly surprised to hear.
Yeah.
But
they did release the funds, and I did get paid, and so that's a sealed deal now. But I believe because they don't take returns, I believe that she was trying to skirt the system, and it was buyer's remorse, and she was trying to find an excuse to get them to push through the return. Interestingly, she is reselling the bag and did not mention anything about the horrible odor. But
yeah, so I mean, I definitely do think that there are times that when you have something in storage over time, especially if it gets hot in the room where it's stored, that odors and stains can come up. I remember one time do you remember that beautiful white dress that I got?
Yeah, it's like you went to get it and it had like the stains and everything came out.
Yeah, I had paid to have it professionally dry cleaned. It looked perfect. And then I put it away and it sold for really nice amount of money, pulled it out. And there were just these yellow stains on it that definitely had not been there before. And I think what happened was that it had been in storage up on the third floor of our house, so where it gets really hot, for long enough that the heat had helped to raise some of those stains that were just, hidden below the surface. And told my buyer, refunded them. They were super understanding and of course would rather know than get a stained item. I did offer them, a partial refund before I even mailed it. And they said, no, I'd rather refund. So, luckily they were very understanding, but it was such a bummer. And I would, say that it's possible, but I think in this case, especially because you would have smelled it when you were packing
Well,
it.
I'm allergic and super sensitive to smoke odor. So I would have definitely I would have noticed it if it had that, because she was saying that the smoke odor was so overwhelming that she opened the box and it was just like,
So you would have noticed it when you brought it out.
If it was that overwhelming, I would have noticed it. Yeah. So, my answer was, well, it must, maybe the postal carrier is smoking or something, because I didn't want to,
say you're lying.
No, I didn't want to do that, because you always do find, you don't cast aspersions on buyers. But, so I was friendly and I stated the facts, and Poshmark did find in my favor. My funds are released, and now she is reselling it and did not mention any orders. So
it's good that Poshmark sided with you. And
yeah, I do think, I wonder if too, when looking at the cases, they saw that I'm a Posh ambassador, that they probably maybe went through, my history and saw that there was never a complaint about a smoke odor on any of my items. And maybe they looked at her account and saw that she had, and I'm just guessing, this is all hearsay, but maybe they looked at her account and saw that she had opened other claims, and so, there might be other factors that behind the scenes that I don't even know about. So who knows?
Yeah. Another nice bin sale looked like.
Yeah, so this is a good one. This was because it wasn't a big sale, but for 99 cents a pound, I found it in the bins, and I sold it. I took an offer for 15 and they paid full shipping because they had made me the offer. So I didn't have to give a shipping discount. And that went out yesterday, and easy sale.
Great to this kind of 70s Henley look is definitely back in. So not surprised that did well.
Yeah, it was a cute top and it was in perfect condition, for the bins. So
yeah, always nice to find that in the bins.
Mm-hmm.
No stains or anything to worry about.
Ooh, this is nice.
Yeah, so I think you were.
I remember when you got that. Yes.
I really like picking up. So DVF, of course, is Dan von Furstenberg. Mm-hmm. Silk Assets is her diffusion line that she did for QVC. So it's definitely a lower end of her brand, but it is always silk. It's very 80s, so it has that kind of funky, retro look. I definitely listed this on Depop as well as Poshmark, but it did on Poshmark, and I got a solid offer, so I took it, and
nice.
Pretty happy with that. So yeah, I mean DVF, the Silk Assets are going to go for less than.
Yeah, it's less than the Diane. Like if you find a vintage Diane von Furstenberg silk wrap dress,
yes,
that's going to go
for $28.
A totally different thing. Yeah.
And then this is a funny item.
That's a different one.
So as Nadine, as you know, I do play Fortnite, which is one way that I like to bond with your children. Yeah, although we've never actually played against each other before. So
I know they keep asking me too. That reminds me because they keep asking me, "What's Lula's?" I want to.
I'll send it to you.
They do ask me that.
So yeah, I think I changed it so it's lo-fi, like my eBay name.
They might be. Though, I'm telling you.
They'll probably beat me. I'm not that good. But I was trying to play on my iPad, and I learned that you can use the Xbox controllers with an iPad. So I bought this on Shop Goodwill for, I think I paid about $30 total with shipping. I did not sell it for the full 80. I sold it for 65 because it did not have the code that comes with like extra stuff for the game. So if it has the code, I think there's some of them were going for a lot more. And then the box was also slightly damaged, which I don't think helped. But I looked at some of the other items of these that had sold, and it seemed like a fine offer. So I took it, and I pretty much doubled my money on this from Shop Goodwill. So, goes to show, I know that Shop Goodwill sometimes can feel like it adds up in the shipping and fees and everything, but you can definitely get stuff there and make a good flip. So,
and also just a little added, I know we have like a few minutes, but I just wanted to say with Shop Goodwill with the shipping, I had a recent thing that happened to me. I bid on a lot of DVDs for my kids, and I won the lot for $9.99. The DVDs were not worth that much. My youngest son loves Octonauts. It's like one of the few educational programs that that he'll pay attention to. And so I found this Octonauts lot, and I went to pay, and it was over $40. And I won the auction for $10. So they were charging $27 for shipping. And I was like, are you kidding me? And the DVDs, it was 6 DVDs that are super light. So I did message them, and they said that it was an error, and they did adjust it. And they not only adjusted it, they gave me an extra discount for the trouble. And I got the whole lot for $8 something.
That's lovely.
I ended up paying like next to nothing for it. So yeah, so definitely if you see something like that, they will work with you. Don't always think that they're trying to scam you or message them and they will, they felt bad that they had made an error. So
I was not expecting that outcome.
I wasn't expecting that outcome either.
Cool.
Yeah. So
that's really lovely. I'm so glad.
So I paid less than the actual bid price. And I didn't pay anything for shipping or handling. So they really adjusted it well for me. I was like,
and that is a great example of good customer service.
Exactly. So definitely. Yeah. So Shop Goodwill is not always out to, like our first thing was, what are they trying to make a profit on the shipping? No, it was an error. It was a human error. That was all.
Okay, so I don't know why I thought that was an eBay. This was Shop Goodwill that happened.
It was Shop Goodwill.
Oh, okay.
It was an auction that I won. Yes.
But still, same. I'm really glad to hear that. That's lovely.
Yeah, because I almost had a heart attack when I was like 40. So it was like $42 or something, and I went to check out, and I was like, really? On $10? Like, I love my son, but not that much. Like, and yeah. So, and I did open up a ticket, and they were super like. So I paid my $8 and change, and okay.
That's great.
Yes.
And as always, we end with a question for all of you. So we would love to know, what is the most used tool in your reseller toolbox? If it's something like the humble measuring tape that we love, or if
Like I said, I walk out the house with, this is
a specialty tool that you use for, something that you sell that might be a little out of the ordinary that we wouldn't have even thought of. We love to know all of those little details about how you sell on eBay and Poshmark and Depop.
Yep. Could be a cleaning tool, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have multiple measuring tapes too, I should add. This is my favorite, but I will misplace them. So I probably have like 3 or 4 just laying around so that if I misplace one, I always have one handy, so.
Definitely. I have, because I also sew, and I use them for knitting and stuff. So I have one with like my craft stuff, and then I have a couple with my reselling stuff. So they're all around the house.
Yeah. So it does help to have multiples.
Yeah. And so leave us a comment down below, and we want to hear from you.
Yes.
And as always, you can find us all over the internet. So Poshmark, Depop, eBay, sometimes on Mercari, never know where. We're always trying different platforms. You can email us at nalothrifts@gmail.com if you have some feedback or ideas, a topic for a show that you would love to see. And you can follow us on Instagram, ThriftyNay and Lola Thrifts.
And also next week, again, as a reminder, we will have Anastasia on talking about East Coast, regional East Coast thrifting. So definitely stay tuned for that. She'll be on at 1 p.m. East Coast time, 10 a.m. West Coast time. And she will be talking all about what she sells and the differences, kind of the culture shock from, being in the Northeast to the Southeast.
I'm super excited to hear about that.
Yeah.
I know we always see the Florida items from Shop Goodwill and Blue Boxes, and it seems like totally different stuff from what we find up in the Northeast. So definitely will be fun to talk to her. And
yes, definitely. So stay tuned for that next week, and have a great week, everyone. And see you next week.
We'll see you next week. So 1 p.m. once again.
Yes, that's our new time now, because it's just like we kept changing it. I keep having stuff in the morning, and so we're like, why don't we just change the show at that time? So yeah.
And we'll see you then and there.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.